And welcome back, everyone, to Between Bells. I'm Baker Pachano in New York as we continue to see the aftermath effect of the pandemic. Many small businesses still feeling the pinch. This is inflation and supply chain woes, and labor shortages continue to take a toll on economic conditions. Javier, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. So according to the National Federation of Independent Businesses, 51% of small businesses were not able to fill up job openings, and they grappled with finding a lot of quality labor. What sort of unique challenges are small businesses facing right now, especially businesses of color?
The small business community in the U.S. is really grappling with a variety of challenges. Keep in mind, we're still reeling from the COVID pandemic. That caused a shortage in the properly trained types of individuals that we need to run our businesses. It made it increasingly difficult for us to hire and maintain those employees, coupled with supply chain disruptions that are still with us today, coupled with an 8.5% interest rate when we're used to something around 1.8, 1.9. We're now grappling with 8.5 inflation rate. And now, on top of that, we have skyrocketing energy costs. So it's a very difficult time for America's small business community. But, we continue to push forward and continue to look for the better opportunities and keep our businesses alive and the American economy moving forward.
Javier, so many labor shortages are impacting so many different industries. We thought when the pandemic started to subside and we went back to the restaurants and there were problems with going to a restaurant, you thought, okay, it'll be a few months, they'll hire some more people, but those problems have continued to persist here. Is there any sort of hope that at the end of the day that these labor shortages will subside?
I think eventually we will see an end to this. And listen, I have to tell you that, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm a Biden fan. I believe in Uncle Joe. I voted for Uncle Joe. I want to see him and his administration succeed, because if they do, then America succeeds and we all move forward. But the reality of it is, at the United States Hispanic Business Council, we pride ourselves on calling balls and strikes. And right now, this administration is really, they've missed the mark in terms of handling this economy and the variety of challenges that persist, that ultimately are being felt most by America's small business community.
And the other part that's sad in all of this, Javier, is optimism has really sort of gone down. Small business owner optimism edged down for the 5th straight month dating back in May. That is now the lowest point ever recorded. And the sad part is the unemployment rate is getting lower and lower. We're almost basically to where we were at before the pandemic. So how do you sort of compartmentalize those two parts here?
There was a recent study that found that 83% of small business owners believe that there is a recession coming. And there were, I think, 550 different kinds of businesses in 13 different industries that were polled. And even with that, 83% of them believing that the recession is coming, 83% of them believed that we will survive this. We made it through the pandemic. Listen, we're American entrepreneurs. We're optimistic by nature. We wouldn't be small business owners if we weren't optimistic. But it is a real challenge right now. And as I said, it's a witch's brew of, interest rates, skyrocketing energy costs, continuing supply chain challenges. We will push through, but we really need an administration that understands our challenges and is helping us deal with them.
If you're looking for optimism, I love this. According to the Small Business Administration, Latinos are opening more small businesses than anyone else in this country. What's sort of causing that growth? Because to me, that seems like an amazing sort of opportunity here.
It is, and thank you for calling that out. At the United States Hispanic Business Council, we pride ourselves on advocating on behalf of men and women who happen to be of Hispanic descent. But we never forget that we're first and foremost American businesses. So every tax bill we pay, every job we create, every product we manufacture, every service we provide goes to benefit America's economy. We are the fastest growing segment of the American small business community. We're growing at a rate of 3 to 1 when compared to the general market. We start up 3 ventures to every 1 venture started up by our counterparts. And to this day, America's small business community is the very backbone of the American economy. We create 67% of new jobs in this nation. So as our small business community goes, so goes the nation. And I'm very happy that the Small Business Administration and frankly the Biden administration has recognized the power and the potential of America's Hispanic business community.
Yes, so well said. Javier, such a pleasure to have you here.
Switching to immigration now, crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border are at or near their highest in about 2 decades. And now Texas Governor Greg Abbott is authorizing state forces to take unprecedented action. Abbott is giving authority to the Texas National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety to return undocumented immigrants back to Mexico's border. However, he stopped short of saying that he will actually deport them, saying that that is a federal responsibility and would go beyond his powers. Now, for more on this, let's bring in Javier Palomares. He's the president and CEO of the United States Hispanic Business Council. And Javier, you say Abbott's order underscores the severity of the problem. What do you mean?
Well, it's political theater to some extent. It does, in fact, underscore just how drastic the situation is here in South Texas and frankly, throughout the nation. For far too long, immigration reform has eluded both parties, and a common sense solution is really necessary. As business people, the members of the United States Hispanic Business Council believe that our Congress needs to come together. We need to have the political will to reach across the aisle and find common sense solutions that work for our economy and for the American people.
Now, this is an interesting move by Abbott because the Texas DPS and the National Guard, they can round up as many migrants as they want. They can charge them with trespassing. They can take them all the way to the border, but they don't have the authority to take them across the border. All they can do is leave them still within the state of Texas. It's being called catch and release by some folks that are critical of this. How do you see this and what the action is that Abbott wants to take down there?
Well, there again, I mean, I think it's political theater, but it does underscore just how difficult the situation has become here. We need the American people to come together to insist that our elected officials have the political courage to put the American people before partisan politics. Listen, as a businessman, I understand the importance of immigrants. Here in America, we have the greatest economy ever conceived in the history of mankind. And immigrants have played an important role in creating that amazing economy that we have. And as we stand right now, more than 45% of the Fortune 500 companies were started by an immigrant or the child of an immigrant. And corporations like AT&T, Bank of America, eBay, Google, Nordstrom's, Tesla, Verizon, and the list goes on. They were all started in America, and they were all started by an immigrant. Now imagine what our economy would look like without those corporations. Imagine what our stock market would look like without those corporations, or our global standing as a nation would look like without those corporations. There is a place for common sense, legal immigration that helps this nation and continues to feed the desire and the hustle and the ingenuity that immigrants bring to this nation.
Now, Javier, you know what you're talking about there as far as business leaders go, because you're a businessman now, but you came to this country as a migrant laborer yourself. And I'm just learning your son-in-law is a Border Patrol agent. So what are you hearing from him? And does that make for some interesting conversations around the holiday dinner table?
It certainly does, you know, and I love my son-in-law, of course, and my children. The reality of it is that they don't have the privilege of having an opinion. They've got a job to do, and the job has become untenable. These amazing men and women that are trying to protect our border are absolutely overwhelmed. Our nation needs to step up and help them do their job. We need common sense immigration reform right now. As it stands right now, there are over 11 million jobs that are unfilled in this nation, over 500,000 construction jobs, over 1 million manufacturing jobs, over 1.5 million transportation, and 1.5 million hospitality jobs, 2 million health services jobs, 2.5 million professional services jobs that are unfilled. There is a place for immigrants that want to fill those jobs, but do so in a uniform and sustainable fashion, in a fashion that's helpful to the American people and the American economy. But The situation right now is completely out of hand. It's time for our Congress to act. The only thing more broken than our immigration system is our Congress. And we need to insist that our elected officials do their job. They need to have the political will to reach across the aisle and work together for common sense solutions that help our economy and help the American people.
And that is a point that Javier Palomares, our guest here, is pointing out, that everyone agrees it's broken. No one's coming together to fix it. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. God bless. Thank you.
You've probably heard recently, amidst all of the talk about the state of the Democratic Party, that they have something of a Latino problem. That's generally how it's identified. But what does that actually mean? Where are they doing well? Where are they not doing well? And what can they do to improve their position in the future? President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Business Council, Javier Palomares, welcome to the show as well.
Thanks for having me, John.
I'm ready to dive into all of this with you. Christina, first of all, and I want to get this perspective from both of you. When people say that this problem exists, they're not often necessarily super specific about what it means, where it might be true, where it might not. To the extent that this problem does exist, how would you define it?
You know, I tend to put the Hispanic or Latino problem that the Democrats are having in two buckets. One is a bucket that would be labeled abandonment and neglect. And then the other one would be labeled the economy and financial prospects. If you go to the abandonment and neglect bucket, the Democratic Party historically has counted upon the Latino vote and has received it for time immemorial. For the last couple of elections, there was a disproportionate amount of time, energy, resources, and finances focused on other minority groups, and rightly so. Minority groups to include the African American community, the LGBTQ community, the Asian community. Nothing wrong with that, but it was done almost at the exclusion of the Latino community. And so the strategy appeared to be, we got the Latino vote, don't worry about it, it's all good, let's focus on these other pockets. Maybe not the best idea. If you look at where we stand today, there are more Hispanics in America than there are African Americans and Asians combined. According to the last census in 2020, African Americans comprised about 12% of the population, Asians comprised about 6%, combined about 18%. Latinos, we comprised about 19.5% of the population, and we continue to be the fastest growing segment of the population. So you can't ignore a community for that long and expect it just to show up when you need the vote. And so now you see Democrats kind of struggling, trying to figure out what was the last thing we talked about and where do we pick up? And so when they do talk to us, it's kind of one-way communication and it's unidimensional. They talk to us about immigration. Nothing wrong with it. We care about immigration. But if you really understand our community, to Christina's point, there are other things that matter more to us. The economy, healthcare, education, national security, and yes, immigration, but maybe fourth or fifth down the line. And so the tonality is wrong, the timing is off, and you're seeing the results of that in pockets like South Texas, where Hispanics are leaving in droves to the Republican Party, which has been quietly, creating a ground game and talking to the Latino community very effectively about the issues that matter, the economy, jobs, inflation, and things of that nature.
Well, I want to stay on that for just a minute, because I think both aspects of what you talked about are likely part of why we're seeing this shift. You definitely have that abandonment, you have the lack of focus, and even when the focus is there, it doesn't tend to be very deep. It's like an inch thin. You mentioned there that the Republicans are developing this ground game and talking about these issues. So that's like an acknowledgement of those problems. Do you feel like the inroads they're making are a result of them putting forward, potential plans to solve those problems, or is it simply acknowledgement and a little bit of attention?
It's really acknowledgement and attention. There's no real plan from the Republicans of how they're going to make things better. It's simply a calling out of how badly things are going. But with that said, there is no argument that things are not going well. I mean, if you look at where we stand right now, we're dealing with inflation that is at about 9.5%. I mean, that's the worst inflation we've seen in half a century. We're used to like 1.8, 1.9, if that. We're dealing with 9.5% inflation. You've got energy costs that are going through the roof. And when energy goes up, everything goes up. Transportation costs more, distribution costs more, warehousing costs more, pharmaceuticals cost more, fertilizer, cosmetics, everything costs more when energy costs more. And so we're not, the Democratic Party is not talking to the Latino community about the reality that we're living. And therein lies, I think, an opportunity for Republicans to jump in. They haven't offered any solutions. They've simply pointed out that these things are going wrong. And sure enough, they are.
I know that your focus, is going to be on the more business side. To the acknowledging, of course, that Latinos in different parts of the country, in different socioeconomic classes, whether they're new arrivals or third gen, are going to have very different economic interests. Are there any general lessons that the Democrats or Biden specifically could take for communicating around those topics?
Absolutely. There's so much ground to cover here. First of all, before I forget, shout out to Chuck Rocha. That guy's been preaching the gospel since time immemorial. And the Democratic Party would have done well by themselves if they'd listened to him a long time ago. We'd be in a different position today. So Chuck understands and knows what he's talking about. And you're right. I mean, they bring him in for literally a few weeks and not to be seen again until the next election. That's not the way to do it. I'd like to use two smaller data points to kind of talk to a broader issue. Two indicators that I look at, and that I think that Latinos maybe don't look at it necessarily in that fashion, but they're feeling it this way, that are, I think, really important in trying to figure out and take the temperature of the Latino community. Those two key indicators are Hispanic household income and Hispanic home ownership. If you look at household income, in 2018, it was about 54,000 median household income in the Latino community. 2019, it went to 57. We were feeling pretty good. And then all of a sudden, by the end of 2020, we were down to 55 and we're trending lower now. And so this is real for the Latino voter. And so they're feeling this literally every single day with no prospects or anything to kind of give them any hope that there's relief coming. The second indicator is Hispanic home ownership. From 2019 to 2021, 3-year period, it went from 47.5% to like 48.4%, almost a full percentage point. Yeah, and I thought, well, that's not bad. But then you look at African American home ownership in the exact same time period, and it went from like 42% to 45.8%. So 3.8 percentage points. That's about a 400% increase compared to the Latino community in the exact same time period. So the average Latino, to Christina's point, isn't thinking about it in that perspective. They just know their personal reality. And that's what happens. And then you go to the broader point. I think Hispanics kind of traditionally have been socially more conservative. And when government or entities that have promised economic delivery, economic success, when they don't deliver on that, then Hispanics go back to their roots and they go back to the conservative kind of view. And we're seeing that right now. And no one's really calling it what it is. But when you look at the smaller data points, it begins to point and kind of you connect those dots, it creates that picture. And that's what we're seeing right now. And to the point that Christina made, though, I don't want to cover the whole thing in black and blue. There are some real bright spots. As I said, I just came from the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. I spent about 10 days down there. I was in McAllen. I had the good fortune of meeting a young woman named Morgan Lamantia. She's a Democrat, proud Democrat, in the belly of the beast. One is doing exceptionally well. But if you listen to her messaging, John, it's about jobs. It's about wages. It's about the economy. It's about healthcare. It's about security. And I would venture to say, rule of thumb, that her constituency is probably like 85, 90% Latino. She's a Democrat, proud of it, but she's hitting the right tonality. And lo and behold, she won. And to Christina's point, there are bright spots in this battle. I just wish that Washington would watch the Morgan Lamantias and see what they're doing and study from them and then create a larger message that talks about the issues that truly matter to the Latino family: the economy, jobs, and national security, inflation, things of that nature. Immigration, yes, but down the line. Right now, we need to take care of business.
I agree. Yeah, no simple single solution, but they can't continue to act as if there are no solutions, that there aren't people, whether it's activists, whether it's campaign advisors and those sorts of things, or as you've identified, some candidates who have figured out elements of this. There are things that can be learned if they care enough to actually look.
Or worse yet, they can't continue to behave as though there aren't any problems. There surely are problems. We need to solve them.
Yeah. Well, to that end, I do appreciate both of you taking time out to join us and lending your perspective. I really do appreciate it. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you. Good day. Bye.